Hello. Okay, this video will be as long as it sort of ends up being. Might be long, might not be, but it's just a quick one on the what you want to ink and what you want to sort of prioritize inking. I've had a few people ask me how to do it, so I'll jump in with the blue steel, but I'll cover another deck as well. Blue steel, we were running with about 16 uninkables. It usually goes to 17, but that doesn't mean the rest of the cards are all, they're fine to be inked. Um, there's sort of a way you want to look at it and a way you want to process this. Very powerful cards like Hiram and the items just aren't ones you want to be inking straight away or just thinking, oh, I don't need them right now on this turn, so I'm going to put them in the inkwell. Um, but I'm trying to process in my head the tier list that I would go for things to ink first. So starting off, when you get a fresh hand, I'd always look at duplicates. So if you drew two Smees, you probably don't need two Smees, or there isn't going to be a point where you can develop two Smees, or two 2 drops, or two 5 drops, or the 5 drops and the 6 drops for the whole new world. So look at that first. Um, and then yeah, so if you've got two Smees, just ink one of the Smees. That's really the simplest one and the easiest one we want to look at for inking. To the point where if you get a good hand, but you want maybe a couple other cards, it might be best just to keep one card back because it's like, hey, this is something that looks really good to ink in this matchup. I've mentioned a few times in the Mulligan Vide, I'll do that because I just don't want to mulligan into like a dime or something that I really just don't want in my opening hand. Um, the second sort of tier I would put is after you know what your matchup is. So if you know your matchup doesn't have any Rise of Titan targets and locations, you can put that in the inkwell. If you know it's like a Ruby Sapphire, you can baboom. You have nothing to baboom. You can put that in the inkwell. If you know they have no items and you've got other 5 drops, we can put Beast in there because we know we don't need to break anything. So yeah, first off, duplicates. Secondly, situational cards. Even still, there's the fact that if you draw a Let It Go and they're a 2 drop Ursula, they're not going to be targeting your Let It Go, but them thinning your hand is can be quite upsetting. So and that matchup doesn't really have many targets for Let It Go, except for when it gets later on where you might want to do it on a Tragic Beast. But yeah, that's another thing to look at. So firstly, duplicates. Second line is sort of situational. Do I need a baboon for this matchup? Do I need a Rise of Titans? Throw that in there. And the last tier I'd put as I drew this too early, which is just happens sometimes. If you drew a Tamata on your opening hand, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to develop that. And I think Bell sort of goes into that category as well. So if you drew that right away, it's unlikely you're going to be able to get the ink count without maybe some really nice Harem draw to be able to play it. Remember, we are Whole New World, so we'll be resetting the hand as much as we can. So yeah, so firstly, duplicates. Secondary, situational. Third, look at I drew this card too early. And to be honest with you, in this deck, the only ones I'd say that are too early are Bell and Toa because they're dime targets, and sadly we've just got them before, and we're gonna Holy World, we're gonna burn this hand, and we want everything in our hand in the inkwell anyway. Um, and that's also another thing to think about a blue steel. Majority of your starting hand will go into the inkwell, except for some cards you want to play, like the ramp, developing your board, and the card draw cards. But everything else most likely is going to get quilled or thrown into the inkwell. So don't be too worried about it, as long as you still see that Smee ramp 5 drop Sing Whole New World for most matchups. That's fine. Of course, pop score on turn one if you can as well. The items are an interesting one. If my hand was littered with them, say I had like three, I'd probably want to put one of them in there to reserve the other cards in my hand if the other cards I need them. So like I wouldn't be inking a Smee so I could keep one of the items. But the item's also very good to keep. Usually the best thing to have is two of these items with a quill because you can play it on turn one, quill on turn three, and afford to play the other item with the extra ink that you just drew, with you just gained from quilling something away. So yeah, I'd say prioritize duplicates first, then situational, then I just drew this card too early. And then for the quill, yeah, the same. You can do the same thing with the situational cards. Not every matchup's going to need grab your swords, and not every matchup's going to need a Zeus. If you draw an extra whole new world, you put that in there. And possibly I drew this card too early could be put in for Ariel as well. But yeah, I'll just reiterate it once more. So duplicates you want to look at, then your situational cards, sort of your removal cards that you might not need for this matchup, and then cards you just drew too early, which is mainly just dime targets. But yeah, I think going into and then going forward from that, it's just you're going to have to sort of feel out your hand. Don't throw a harem in the inkwell if you're lacking any other sort of card draw. But on the other side, if you're going to whole new world, you don't really need to hear him, and he sort of goes into the category of I drew him too early, because Hirams are great to draw after the whole new world to link you to another one or just to keep the pressure on. But sometimes you're going to be like, I want a whole new world this round, so this turn, so I don't even need to think about him. But again, it's another situational thing. If you're scared that you're not going to get your whole new world off, keep the Hiram. But say if you know they have no 2-drop Ursula just from the deck you're playing against, or you know they can't remove your 5-drop because they can't be king because you've got a Smee or a Mickey next to it, you're fine to just put that in the Inkwell. But yeah, that's sort of the pattern I'd go for with blue still.